I think of, and forgive me, you know, ike o ko he malihi au a ka po Maikaʻi wale au I ka lawe keiki hoʻokama na kekahi po e kupuna ina hewa wau hui kalamai au. When I think of values, and I'm reflecting back on some of what we was presented to us a little earlier today, and then when I think of our esteemed colleague from Aotearoa, and that idea that, you know, forgive me if I offend anybody, I think we really need to be very careful about one wording our values, because it was a way of life, not just an expression. Yeah, at least that's how I have seen it, and with kupuna from Niʻihau through Hawaii, it was manifest in how they lived, not just embraced in one word. And I realize that this is a very special audience here, and you understand that, but sometimes outside, you know, I watch too often where we see our values are embodied in today it is this, and tomorrow it's that, and did we live it? So, you know, this isn't necessarily, I'm sorry, tied maybe right to our topic today, but when I think of kupuna, I think of their olelo a'o, their olelo noʻeau. On Lānaʻi, one of the famous sayings of the elder Kaopuiki family was, Maikaʻi ka hana lima ʻono no ka aia ka waha. You think about it. How beautiful, yeah? Hands do good work, the mouth eats good food. That's a basic value, and we can apply that to library sciences. We can apply it to everything that we do, you know? So, in interviewing kupuna across the islands, it's been interesting to see little twists on that. So I'm growing up on Lānaʻi, Tutu Papa says, Maikaʻi ka hana lima ʻono no ka aia ka waha. Then I go to Kona, and I'm interviewing Tutu Kinolu ka hana nui. And we're up on the slopes of Hualalai one day, and he is telling me about his tutu and when they would go up onto the mountain to gather things like that. And he would always say, even if they were going hunting, the tutu would always tell them to respect the aina, to even respect the animal, you know, just go make any kind, because he would say, hana ino kalima ai ino no kawaha. Think about that, yeah? Hana ino kalima ai ino no kawaha. When the hands do dirty work, the mouth going to eat dirty food, right? And so again, it comes back to this idea about a value or perspective. Then I go with Tutu Mahiula Hashimoto at Ha'ena Kauai, and he goes just simple, hana kalima ai kawaha. Work with your hands, you're going to eat with your mouth. Eat food, yeah? Basically. So those kinds of values, though, I think that being that we are talking about Hawaiian island-based subject matter, that we need to respect and understand some of those values. It's like the saying that I mentioned earlier, that's the end of a chant, but o imi o nalo wale o loa ala e. I pray and believe that that is a prophecy, that your kupuna in antiquity knew change was coming, but they told us, don't lose faith, don't despair, because if you seek for those things, you will find them, they will be understood. And so what's so cool about the work that we're doing, and I have to say with Ulukau, with Alulike, with all of the work that's being done through the museum, I don't know how many of you have, probably all of you, but you know, I mean, Library of Congress and that whole digitizing of America's chronicling of America, you know, I mean, finally, I was so happy to see like the Pacific Commercial Advertiser is on there, you know, and just a wide range of things. And we have so many things that we can access now so we can better understand the history. And that's the work that you folks do that I think is so important. For us on Lānaʻi, we have hundreds and hundreds of accounts that would have been lost or have never been seen since they were originally written. I had the privilege, my wife and I, Ona, we went to Harvard and were granted the opportunity to scan digitally all of the ABC-FM records and bring them home to Hawaii. I gotta tell you, you know that as early as the 1820s, some of those nice guys was writing letters back to the board in Boston saying, if we don't educate them and convert them, we will annex them. So, you know, there's some very interesting histories in there. And you read the sterilized or the sanitized journals that have been published, and again, great work, but when you actually go through their records, you see that they were writing in a very different tone and manner So that anything Hawaiian has survived, sorry, I'm just going to say for us on Lānaʻi, that our population, and I don't mean any disrespect to our esteemed kupuna Keneti Emery, where he believed that the population in his study in 1924 following the 21-22 archaeology on Lānaʻi was 3,000. We know from archaeological cultural resource evidence that there were more than 6,000 people on Lānaʻi. 1793 is the earliest estimate, 6,000. In 1823, the population was 3,000. In 1832, the population was 1,600. In 1848, it was 604. In 1878, it was 275. In 1893, it was 175 Hawaiians. When James Dole purchased Lānaʻi in 1922, there were 100 Hawaiians on the island. That anything survived is a miracle. And what we in communities, I'm a grassroots-based community researcher, no real formal training, a little bit of Park Service stuff. I try to listen and learn from all of you folks and get engaged with you. But you know what we really need is we need to, and why I think these values and the work that you do are so closely intertwined, we need to help people gain access to their history. One of the things, and I mentioned earlier, having had the privilege, my wife's kupuna was Mrs. Puku'i Tutu Kawena, and I knew Tutu Kawena before I knew my wife, and I would spend a day a week with her sitting up at her home at Hu'elani. And at one point I foolishly asked her, I said, Tutu, pea oi lo'akela inoa fragments of Hawaiian history. You know, I didn't understand how she came up with the title, Fragments of Hawaiian History. And her response was, na I no. Ua kapa ia kona mo'olelo na huna no ka mo'olelo Hawaii. It was I himself who called his tradition fragments, huna no ka mo'olelo Hawaii. And she said if it was fragmented for him, then how much more so for us today? So the real critical thing is if you can help provide communities with factual information, that doesn't mean that we forget oral history, because we know that there are valuable traditions that were never recorded. But remember the first commentator about the native language newspapers? For years and years and years, I wondered why no one in the State Historic Preservation Division and these groups were doing any work with the native language newspapers. Those papers, as again our esteemed colleague from Aotearoa said, you know, we got this information, but if we don't use it, if we don't integrate it into our daily lives now, poho, right? It just sits there. Those are oral histories waiting to be heard again. So values, all connected. Remember though, Hawaii first, as far as this aina, this is the place of the birth, this is, you know, everything is alive, yeah? So I'm gonna probably lava kupono, but I'd like to share with you one last saying that Tutu Papa taught me, and I think this is an expression of a Hawaiian value that I've tried to live by, but it's important that you also accept. O ka mea Maikaʻi mā lama, o ka mea me ke ole, e ho o ka wale aku, yeah? Keep the good. So if I said something okay, keep it. But if I said something that offended you, hui kala mai ia'u. Ai, aloha.